All right, everybody, so we've pretty much wrapped up the black coupe. So before we kind of close it out, if you will, talk about what we've done up until this point, and then bring Brandon back, you know, kind of get his thoughts and things. I don't know what to do with the keys. I feel like a lot of you probably could be in a similar situation when you do this stuff. You know, you set a tool down, you don't know where it goes. But in my case, last thing we were doing, we were checking the headlight bulbs, we were checking the taillight bulbs. For all I know, I may have left those things in the trunk. So if you've done this on a coupe or even a convertible, you're gonna have to get back here, you're gonna have to pull the seat bottom, pull the seat back, and then if they are back there, well, you're gonna have to use some type of fishing tool to get them out, magnets or something similar. So here we go. I'm hoping they're back here, but if they're not, I don't know. Must have thrown them away. One screw. You can tell how much a car's been apart and how much it hasn't because the backing board for this seat back isn't ripped through. Nobody pays attention to these when they first were taking the seat backs out of these cars, and they just rip the backing board. Well, moment of truth. I don't see them. Nope. Wow. Okay, so in the event that I do not find these keys, it very well could be that we close this video out with replacing the lock cylinders and the ignition cylinder. And if you have to do that back here, you got to crawl all the way to the back and remove the latch from the trunk lid or the striker, either or, and then you can lift the trunk out. So what we're going to talk about today is what you do if you've lost your key to the ignition cylinder, or the ignition cylinder may be damaged in some form or fashion internally. You don't need very many tools. As far as the steps go for the ignition cylinder, it's gonna be all the same on all the Fox body Mustangs, but what will be different is how you get to the ignition cylinder. This is a 93 coupe, so we'll have our steering column trim covers, the upper and lower, and then we'll also have the knee panel. 87, 89 will be similar, and then of course your early cars, it's gonna be similar as well with your column trim. So before we get rolling, just make sure you disconnect your negative battery cable. The one on this car was already disconnected. I'm gonna get in here, I'm gonna take apart this column trim, and then we'll pull this knee panel out. Not gonna go into too much detail on how to do it, just because each year range will be a little bit different. So we'll fast forward through these steps. Okay, so what we may be able to do without pulling the metal reinforcement panel here, we may be able to disconnect this without doing so, yes. So here's your connection here to your ignition cylinder. We'll just use a little flathead screwdriver and we'll disconnect that. Actually, you know what? I may not even need that. Just be able to, aha. Okay, so on this ignition cylinder, there's usually a button underneath here. We'll show it. And what we're gonna try first, we're gonna try just drilling through this and depressing the button and pulling it out. I've seen where some folks will go ahead and drill this button out, then drill through your ignition cylinder. It's kind of one of those things, whatever you feel is right and whatever works for you, go with it. I'll be honest with you, I've never had to do this, so we're gonna learn together. And for those of you that have done this several times, feel free to share your story. So I'm gonna go ahead and rig up our drill and our drill bit here. This is a 1/4 inch. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna make us a little drill stop with a piece of tape. All we'll need to drill through that ignition cylinder is about 1.5 inches. We're gonna get scientific. Out comes, not scientific, we're gonna get accurate. Out comes the tape. All right, there's a give or take an 1.5 inches. And we'll just wrap this a few times, and this is, like I said, this will act as our drill stop. Go and insert our drill right into the center here. Oh wow. All right, that is right down the center. All right, running in reverse a little bit. I went all the way to our measurement where our tape was. All right, so from the back side of the cylinder, hammer and a chisel, give it a few hefty taps. Now we're gonna do some cleanup. She's moving. And depending on your steering wheel, all right, well, I'll just lock the column. So if yours is locked, you'll have to kind of shimmy this back and forth. Okay, so what I've done, I've actually just, I think our pin, no, I need to drill out more on our button. So I didn't go deep enough. Oh heck, I've separated the, well, that's not good. No, there's still a little bit hanging on this button. Okay, I'm gonna take an appropriate size punch here. We're gonna see if we can't knock this back some. Put a little, every little bit helps. Every little bit of persuasion. Okay. That's actually better. Well, it looks like we still need to remove more material on this button. Ow. Awkward angles. All right, I've pulled it forward and I'm gonna try to get the last bit of this material off. Man, that thing's about to break. Oh, hell. Well, okay. This is about to get real interesting. So since I knocked the face of the ignition cylinder off, I really didn't have much to kind of help drive it out. So remember, like I said, if your steering wheel was in the lock position, you may have to oscillate it back and forth. Got me some vice grips as I was rocking the steering wheel back and forth. You know, kind of just got to do the tango, got to dance with it a little bit. There we go. There's our ignition cylinder. And then we'll just want to look down in there and clean out any debris. All right, so once we vacuum the housing out, we're gonna take a little kind of angled pick, get in behind this retainer, pull it straight out, set it aside. All right, then you're gonna notice a little spacer. You just wanna kind of take the pick and rotate it to where it clears these little notches in the housing, and you can pull this out. You gotta kind of finesse it just a little bit. Make sure you notate the orientation. Take a picture, so you don't forget. So this is the metal gear that drives the actuator rod that moves within the ignition switch. This little end piece here was attached to the ignition cylinder. You can see where the drill bit came all the way through. So that's why it's important to only drill this 1.5 inches. I kind of cheated off camera and went just a little bit deeper than I was supposed to. So use this as a warning, if you will, not to drill too deep. We'll get this gear cleaned up, get all the old grease off of it, and then we'll apply some fresh grease. If you have to disassemble this metal gear, that little plastic retainer is what holds that spacer plate and this gear in position. On some cars, you may see a snap ring, so you'll have to use some snap ring pliers to remove that. The video that we did on the actuator rod, which I believe was on a 1988 coupe, it had a snap ring. So take that as you will. Depending on the different year range, who knows? There could be some other form of device that holds this stuff in place. And while I'm here, I'm just cleaning up this stuff as well. That's that little spacer, and then that was the plastic retainer. This will go a certain way. So, like I said, if you have to remove this stuff, just make a mental note. Take pictures, that way you know how to put it back together. And then as far as grease on this gear, you don't have to get too fancy with it. A general purpose grease will work. This is the interior of the car. Kind of like you're packing a bearing. Just get it down there in the teeth. Okay, so to get the actuator rod and the ignition switch in the correct position, you want to take your flathead screwdriver and wedge it up in between one of the teeth and rotate the actuator rod toward the front of the car. Once you kind of feel it stop and spring back, you're in the correct position. That's where you want it. After that, you can take your gear that has the grease on it that we applied earlier, this isolated spline, 7 o'clock position. Make sure the teeth engage with the actuator rod. Reinstall the metal retainer plate. Sometimes a magnetic tip screwdriver is great, sometimes it's not. Rotate it back into position. And then we can take the plastic retainer. Did I call that metal retainer plate or a spacer? The metal retainer plate's actually the spacer. Terminology is all not correct. The plastic piece is your retainer. So once we have that situated, the new ignition cylinder, we want to rotate this until we can depress pin. Remember, the pin's going to face down here where we were doing the drilling. You align your keyways or your gateway. You may just have to lightly shimmy this so that the end piece on the ignition cylinder seats in the gear. And then check your rotation. All right, there's accessory. And we get the spring back mechanism from the ignition switch. Success. All right, people, so y'all kind of saw me struggle through this. Like I said, had an idea, knew of how to do this, I had just never done it. So I'll pretty much walk y'all through the steps of what I did to accomplish this. All I can tell you is work as methodical as possible. Don't go at this like a bull in a china closet because you're gonna tear something up. Speaking of tearing something up, what you'll notice when you do this, depending on how you have to articulate the drill bit to drill out the button or the pin for the ignition cylinder, you may enlarge that opening in the ignition cylinder housing. That's okay, that's not detrimental. As you pry and do certain things in this general area, this ignition cylinder housing is kind of fragile. I broke just a small piece off of the ignition cylinder housing. It's not detrimental. I don't like doing that type of stuff, but at the end of the day, when you're working on things and you're prying and you're moving, sometimes some things just happen. At the end of the day, we are human. Y'all saw me pull this out. I used a pair of vice grips because I had prematurely knocked off the face on the ignition cylinder. If I wouldn't have done this, I probably would have been successful with the hammer and the chisel as I shimmied the steering wheel back and forth. Another thing, keep in mind the drill bit. Do not drill too deep. Use that 1.5 inches sparingly, because if you go too deep, you run the risk of damaging that gear. And as of this video, that gear is not available, only the actuator. So again, work in a methodical manner. Took us long enough to finally shoot this video. I'm glad we did it. And I guess I'm glad I lost the keys so we had the opportunity to shoot this video. But we're gonna turn y'all loose as always. If you have any questions, drop some comments. We'll get you taken care of. And then until we see the next one, for all things Fox Body, keep it right here at The Real Enthusiast, LMR.com. Too bad we didn't get my reaction for this, but I think y'all could probably know how it went. As I was putting stuff back together, the column trim to be exact, I dropped one of the screws. It rolled towards the inboard side underneath the seat, in between the seat and the console. I reach my hand underneath the seat. I don't find the screw first. I find the gosh darn keys. I cannot make this up. So here they are. We looked high and low on this car. Y'all saw me get back here in the trunk and look. They were just positioned so perfectly underneath the seat track and the slider mechanism that we didn't see them. You know, we didn't think to just run our hand underneath there or anything like that. So if you think you may have misplaced your keys, why do I have this piece of tape on me? No, let's keep going. It's funny stuff, dude. Funny stuff. anyways, I had a piece of tape on my chest because I was doing something, so y'all can disregard that. But if you think you misplaced your keys, double and triple check. Granted, I know we double and triple check. Maybe you need to quadruple check. So